Welcome to a muzzled chat. Now, I got a special caller today. I'm very grateful because so many folks that have struggled with Lyme really are unable due to everything they're faced with just all the symptoms and struggles, like to step forward and let their voices be heard. So it's really exciting that Wendy here is not only brave enough, but she's also had a long but successful healing journey. And I'm so excited. She's championing this disease, bringing awareness, traveling. She's just advocating on behalf of so many that are stuck in that state. Even speaking out on like my behalf, because I'm still in the midst of it. So without further ado, I welcome Wendy to a muzzle chat. How you doing this eve?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you and connecting with this invisible community, because there's so many of us, and I'm blessed to be able to be here speaking. I was bedridden 6 years ago from an undiagnosed infection that went back 10 years.
Wow. So you got diagnosed 10 years ago?
I got diagnosed officially in 2018.
Okay.
And through the ILADS, the doctor that I saw ran the CD57, and that can track how long your body's been producing antibodies, and that went back over 10 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you're in Pennsylvania.
I am in Pennsylvania, and
okay.
It's so many people don't realize that we are the #1 state. I think it's 7 or 8 years running of diagnosed. We're not counting undiagnosed, but diagnosed Lyme.
Okay.
In the country.
So, wow, that hits a little close to home with me, and it's something you're not unaware of. That in fact, as a kid, my family, we grew up on the East Coast, and we had a few different properties in Pennsylvania, and that, from my recollection, is, see, look at me, I struggle. I just struggle. So, if anything, listeners, pay attention. I'm still in the midst. I want to have Wendy do the majority of the talking here, because to hear, for someone to speak on more so the other side of things. But anyway, long story short, as I could recall, the most encounters I in fact had with ticks was on this acreage we had that backed up to the woods, and we were constantly playing in the woods as kids, and it basically became a daily ritual where we were picking ticks off of each other. And it's wild that I went over 30 years in my life with these issues. Nothing too serious until things went chronic, 5 or so years ago, and that finally led to a positive diagnosis like around 4 years ago. So I believe you, Wendy, that it's a threatening area, but also it's weird how doctors are trying to not accredit it in other states as well, as though they're not going to travel on animals and through people and things of that nature and still live and thrive in other climates,
Yeah, absolutely. When I was trying to get diagnosed, I fought for 5 years with my doctor.
Okay.
And I take my dog to the vet, and there's signs everywhere that says 4 out of 5 dogs in where I'm at now in Beaver County have Lyme disease. I'm like, my dog gets it tested in 2 minutes. They're like,
Wow.
your dog has Lyme. I'm like, why can't that happen to me?
Yeah.
If my dog has it and the fleas could have it, and I get bit by a flea, isn't that a vector-borne illness? So, there's a lot of things, unfortunately, that are not consistent in the medical world with treatment.
Wow. So you have such an incredible journey. I just want some of the listeners to actually understand, like, this changed the whole trajectory of your life. And now, are you pretty much full time championing this narrative and trying to bring the proper credibility to this horrific disease slash debatable bioweapon?
Absolutely.
Wow.
By trade, I'm a professional photographer,
Okay.
and I'm sure along the way that's where I got. I never got a rash. Now I do remember having a rash as a child, but
Wow.
I had a swimming pool, and they said it was ringworm. So looking back and through my education now, I kind of wonder, you know, was it something I had as a child? I remember having these health issues that didn't make sense, when I was in fourth grade. So
Mm.
that's still to be determined. But um, was a professional photographer. I worked for the one of the largest portrait companies in the United States as a district manager, and then the company kind of made some changes and closed. And I, had still had my equipment. I still had, I'm a photographer. That's all I knew. So I started a company called Clicks for a Cause, where I helped nonprofits in the Pittsburgh and Eastern Ohio
Mm.
raise money through photography. Whether that was we would photograph families and donate the sessions, or we would go photograph nonprofit events, just so they would have professional photography. So
Mm.
I did that. I was doing amazing work. We helped raise over $25,000 for nonprofits, and
Oh,
then
wow.
I just started to have insomnia. I started to have aches and pains. I had a son, and I had a lot of health issues, unfortunately. So I never thought I would be able to be a mom. So
Mm.
um, once I had my son, I started to have, even more health problems. I started to have a little bit of OCD, which was weird for me. And, my husband said I had pregnancy brain. But, as the years went on, like 3 years later, all the symptoms I got really bad. And my doctors just contributed it to being a new mom, to being, having
Wow.
just stressful life. And, I kind of got, I mean, gaslighting is not even the term I would use for
Mm.
for what I went through and what most women with Lyme disease go through.
Right.
Um, and there came a day where I told my husband, I said, I I I don't want to hurt myself, but I just have these dark feelings. There's something going
Wow.
on. And I had already went to a neurologist before with some severe headaches. And from that day, I went into this dark place of, nobody would believe me and nobody would listen. But I knew that there was something going on in my body, and I started to
Mm.
research Lyme disease. Like you, growing up in Pennsylvania, there's ticks all over the place.
Right.
Never really thought about what diseases they may carry.
Right.
Um, and it took me 5 years, maybe close to six, to finally start getting my doctors to even test for Lyme disease. But
After,
I didn't test
wow.
enough.
After all these symptoms and after kind of connecting the dots yourself, it's still, wow. I don't know why Allie Hilfiger's story even just popped in mind, where it's just like these type of diseases, they don't discriminate, you know, on skin pigmentation or wealth or job title, anything. And even with the abundance of connection and finances, it's still, you really need to find a doctor that is Lyme literate more so than traditional Western medicine, that they're just oblivious.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, I was told there's no way, it's not possible. You didn't have a rash. You don't
Mm.
remember getting bit by a tick, and it was a struggle. And I had a friend who went through the similar thing, but she saw a clinical nutritionist who dealt with mold, and we moved into a home that we didn't realize had mold.
Okay.
So I started treating the mold, and then
Mm-hmm.
I finally, through some different testing, I tested positive for Lyme and Mycoplasma pneumonia and Epstein-Barr, and
Wow.
on and on and on. And I remember sitting in the car, and I just cried, and I was like, they were just leaving me to die.
Wow.
And at that point, I couldn't photograph anymore. I had no creativity. I was bedbound. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't tell you my son's name. I mean, it was.
Oh my
I mean, it
goodness.
was. It was. It was. It was horrible. Is not even the right word for it. But
Right.
but I knew that the only person that was going to advocate for myself was me.
Wow.
So I started to learn everything I could about Lyme disease. I followed the National Institute of Health. They had a vector-borne illness working group in 2017, and I was like, well,
Mm,
what are they talking about, and why aren't they telling us what they're talking about?
right.
So I started to follow the group, and I started to follow the research, and that led me into a rabbit hole that we could talk for hours about.
Yeah.
Um, with Lyme disease and where it came from and
Well,
why the
don't hold back punches here. We want to get to the bottom of it. As far as
yep
the research I've done, it's indisputable.
yep
Plum Island, biowarfare. That's my findings. You know, um, but
yeah.
yeah, have you read that book, Bitten?
I have I have not read the book.
Okay.
I know all the cliff notes about the book.
Yeah.
Under My Skin is a beautiful
Ooh.
documentary for
Yes.
anyone that's got family that doesn't understand the disease. It's
Yes.
a great place to start. And to know that there's doctors that, were well, I guess we'll use the word persecuted. I mean, these doctors were they lost their medical license for trying to talk about Lyme and
Right.
the failed vaccine Limerex. I mean, it's
Right.
it's it's been around. It's not new, but people just seem to not want to talk about Lyme disease or its origination or what it could be or the CDC unfortunately changes all of the time. I mean, so after I started to heal, my son was bitten by a tick. But by
Oh man.
then, I knew the symptoms. I
Right.
knew that we didn't produce the antibodies. I knew we had some genetic issues that we were never going to show positive on a test.
Mm.
So in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure about other states, but this is something that research I'm trying to do as an advocate. In Pennsylvania, you can take the tick and send it to East Stroudsburg
Mm.
University. They will test it for free.
Oh
And they will
wow.
tell you if the ticks have any disease, so therefore you know what you might be up against.
See, that's a great call to action right there. For folks that whether they knew they got bitten or they just find a tick crawling on their body, and I don't care what state you're in, bag that sucker up, find out somewhere you can send it. And even if you end up paying for testing, that is what pretty much hands down one of the most accurate ways is to identifying whether or not that little bugger's carrying the spirochetin and this disease.
Yes, absolutely. And we tested my son's tick, and we had our yard treated, but he went to the neighbors and brought one home. It was Mother's Day. I will never forget. I was devastated because he was 8 years old at the time. But we had the tick tested, and it only carried just the one.
Mm,
Now they can carry 49 plus diseases. So,
right.
but I'm in a state where it's so studied with the ticks, and if I have them on my dog or my cat, I still send them in just for research purposes so they can
Mm.
see. And so far, 5 out of 6 have been positive.
Oh my goodness.
So we actually took my son to a specialist, and he had 7 out of 10 bands, but he never tested positive for Quest. But
Oh
the
my
MDL
gosh.
lab out of I believe Maryland or New Jersey,
Wow.
there's testing out there, and that's where I got into the advocacy because so many people they're just told no, you're negative, or just take this short-term antibiotic, but
Right.
it's so much bigger than that. And
Right.
I had to fight for myself, and I had to fight for my son, and now I fight for other Lyme people, and the majority of the I don't want to say worst cases, but the misdiagnosed cases are women. So
Mm.
that is what I do now full time. Um,
Wow.
I'm back into photography for the first time.
Yay.
Um, Last fall, I photographed a wedding, and if there's any photographers listening, it's an 8-hour day, and then it's a 40-hour work week afterwards
Oh my
with
gosh.
editing. But
Right.
yeah, 6 years. I could not lift my camera or be creative or really
6 years.
commit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you personally, what were some of the greatest like struggles you had? So that's obviously huge. If you couldn't lift your camera for 6 years, physically unable, that's huge because so many people are unaware. A is to the impact of this illness. And then after that, we could obviously dive into how it's truly epidemic levels. right? And people are completely unaware of that and as to why that is. So for you, what were your greatest challenges throughout the years up to kind of finally having your breakthroughs?
It kind of went back and forth a little bit, just with the treatment. And in the last 4 years, I've had three different infections,
Oh
because,
wow.
I live in the high tech area. So, it was a lot of physical at first. It was arthritis, it was joint pain, it
Mm.
settled into my body, into chronic fatigue. And
Oh
then as
wow.
I started the first treatment, physically I could get a little bit better, but mentally I struggled. And
Mm.
then I would get better mentally. The brain fog is, I still stumble with words sometimes. So, I
Mm.
totally appreciate you acknowledging that that's a struggle for you. It's
Oh
sometimes it's still
gosh.
struggle for me.
Yes.
um, and I remember, putting things in the refrigerator that went in the cupboard, or and then I would say words that didn't make sense, and people
Mm.
around me, they didn't notice it, but I would notice it, and I'm a straight A student. I'm a lifelong learner, so for me to
Wow.
struggle with my words, it was really difficult. It was really hard on me mentally to just feel that I lost so much of myself.
Wow. My heart goes out. Yeah, that resonates so profoundly. It was mere months ago that I was essentially bedridden, and one of my greatest challenges was, I mean, not just basic functions. I literally had a hard time putting my thoughts into words. I was, it's like I could put a sentence together in my head, but then voicing it, it was a whole nother story. It's hard to even explain, and it becomes such a struggle because once again, like this illness, this disease, this bioweapon doesn't necessarily show on the outside. So when you're able to get on your feet and you seem to be functioning, and that's why awareness is key for so many reasons. But like it just it breaks my heart that those with this, because I could relate, end up having to be kind of their best advocate when they're that's a really sad advocate considering the state we and the impacts that it could have. So a lot of to not have the outward support or understanding is it's a grave challenge, and we must bring the awareness in. And that's why I just want to tip my hat to you on what you're doing, and then championing this narrative on this podcast. You're just a Lyme warrior, and I'm ever so grateful for what you're doing. Um, yeah, because it's interesting. For me, how this impacted the lack of dopamine, serotonin, cortisol, like it just seemed like there was no way out. So it's it's no wonder as to how this feeds into depression. There's direct correlation with Lyme disease and suicide, and it just it's it's devastating. Now I believe it was the quiet. Is that what? Not the silent or the quiet epidemic. Have you seen that film?
I have not seen
That's
it
a
yet,
good
only
one.
because,
Okay.
I'm doing so much with work. I'm in the middle of
Right.
a house move and things, but I think all of these are great. I've
Right.
been writing a book on my journey, and
Ooh.
I think those of us that are on the other side, that are putting these documentaries out and these books are out,
Right.
they're so key because we feel alone. And I tell everybody,
Right.
you don't get it until you get it, and then
Yeah.
if you get it, you totally get it. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, like you're saying the same words, but it
Right.
makes so much sense because we all just I hate to say it, but like I disappeared from life for like
Oh.
6 years, and
Right.
not because I wanted to. It's
Yeah.
just that this disease, and the three different infections that I had, they all presented differently.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was more neurological. I had tremors. My neurologist is like, we have no idea what's going on with you. But it's those of us that are on the other side. We're trying to to bring awareness, because most of us, we look okay on the outside, but
Right.
there is a war going on inside.
Gosh dang. Yeah, yeah, that's the truth of it. It's wild because I just went through for the first time a different IV treatment today, and it's interesting because like parts of this IV treatment it had felt pretty good, but then I can still tell there's a type of Herx reaction, and I'm tripping up a little more on the in this very conversation. It's such a great challenge. But now that we covered some of, let's just say some, I mean, we just breezed over it as far as the actual impacts. This legit can, folks, be life threatening. It's been directly connected to horrific illnesses that have led to deaths, such as cancers, all sorts of illnesses. Over 300 illnesses Lyme has been attributed to. And we've kind of gone over some of the stats that even a local clinic here, Wendy, this is insane. There's a local cancer clinic that started onboarding Lyme protocols. And after a while of onboarding Lyme protocols, they saw, in fact, as to how it was impacting the body. And they started looking in their cancer patients like, I wonder how many of them might actually test positive for Lyme. So they started testing their cancer patients for Lyme. Over 74% of their cancer patients tested positive for Lyme. So there's obviously a connection because at the point your body has an invading disease or bioweapon that's essentially um, causing inflammation throughout the body, suppressing your immune system. It just goes without saying, it takes no rocket scientist that you're now going to be susceptible to, carcinogens that typically your immune system or body could fend off, right? So it just leads to all sorts of other things. But the quiet epidemic actually touched on as to how epidemic levels this actually is. I believe it touched on in North America alone now, around 500,000 Americans each year are getting diagnosed with Lyme disease. That's more than breast cancer and HIV combined.
Yes.
Yet, why is it? This is the question I'm like asking myself and everyone. Like, why is it I myself had to be afflicted with this horrific disease to even understand even the basics of it and the actual threat it poses to each and every one of us? Like, why is that? So awareness and education is clearly lacking in our civilization and our education systems, and with all the misdiagnosing, like it's through awareness that we're going to up the testing, the treatments, the financial assistance, the protocols, everything. So wow. um what were some of the treatments that led to your greatest like breakthroughs? I know that to the folks listening, that sounds like a very simple question, but there's a lot of co-infections involved. There's a lot of steps and layers, and what helps one individual doesn't necessarily help the other. So it's tricky, but just what I'm curious, and I'm sure some of the listeners would love to know, like, what do you personally feel was most beneficial for you in getting um, essentially quality of life back?
I had 8 different protocols
Oh my
in
goodness.
since the beginning, and
8. Wow.
Doxy didn't work for me.
Okay.
I started to look into genetics and have genetic testing, and learned that my liver does not metabolize the medication, and my body physically responded that way. I got worse with antibiotics.
Holy moly. Okay.
So I found a functional nutritionist, and food changed my life. I would, eliminated a lot of the bad, and then
Hmm.
started to add in good thing to really just boost up my body to be in a healing state. And then
Wow.
so many alternative practices that aren't covered by the insurance. I mean,
Oh yeah.
thankfully, when my company closed, I got my retirement early. It's all gone, but I can live now. So, um,
Wow.
chiropractic care is huge. It helps your central nervous
Oh
system.
really? Okay.
Yes, yes. I invested in an infrared sauna because my chiropractor had one, and I didn't sweat, and I didn't realize that when I wasn't sweating, I wasn't getting any of the toxins out, or even if I was killing the bacteria, it was just recirculating in my body.
Okay.
So I invested in an infrared sauna myself.
Did
Um,
you get the blanket, or what style infrared sauna did you end up getting?
I got a two-person sauna. That way,
Oh,
my
wow.
son and my husband could use it. I got a
Okay.
great deal on the internet with 0% financing, and it was the best thing
No
because
way.
at 140 degrees for an hour, I finally could sweat to help my
Really?
body because, it takes. It, it does so much, like you said. I mean, when your immune system goes down, you're prone to parasites. And if you have parasites, then you can have mineral deficiencies, or if you have
Mm.
heavy metals, and then you don't sweat, and then your methylation. So even if you have the MTHFR, which most people are aware of, 40% of Americans do,
Mm.
it changes your cycle in your body. But if you're just overloaded with all of this stuff, it's like, I guess the best saying is the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So that
Right.
Lyme comes in, and then it's just this cascade of just everything takes over your body, and your body's not in this healing state.
Right.
Um, but I did a lot with herbs. I had wonderful functional nutrition doctors. The second one I had, he had Lyme himself. He had to quit college for Lyme, and
Wow.
so I've been on these different herbal treatments. I really focused a lot on my liver health. Once I actually I read the book Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch, and it changed my life. I'm now a certified holistic health coach. I have training in functional nutrition as well as genetics. So
Mm.
I really had to fine tune because conventional medicine, it made me worse. Um,
Jeez.
Antibiotics don't process in my body, but I learned what foods specifically I needed. I learned I needed more copper. I learned I needed, I couldn't have oxalates. So the spinach and almonds were actually making me sicker
Mm.
while I was trying to heal. So,
Did you go?
herbs, there's a ton of herbs,
Mm-hmm.
but food was been huge for me.
Did you ever go extreme, like carnivore, or to that extent, or just kind of your
I
own elimination?
So I did elimination diet at first, specifically for lowering histamine,
Okay.
specifically getting rid of mold, and just getting my body out of that inflammatory state. And then I went to paleo, which may be worse. But
Mm.
then once I did my genetics, you can learn so much. I mean, there's
Really?
a company that called Gene Food. They'll tell you what to eat. So I'm more hunter gatherer. So
Oh,
I
wow.
need some meat because I'm prone to anemia, but I can't have too much because I have predisposition to heart issues and a whole family history of heart issues. So
Oh, wow.
I've not been specifically carnivore, but organ meats are really big for me because I do have iron and zinc issues.
Mm.
So I really have changed my lifestyle. I mean, my lifestyle, my stress, my food. Um, I don't indulge in maybe a little bit of chocolate here or there, but
Mm.
I had to learn how my body worked on a cellular and a genetic level just because,
Wow.
I felt like I was left to die, and, nobody wanted to listen to me. I'm sure the listeners, if they've dealt with chronic illness, let alone Lyme, when you go to your doctor and they're like, your labs are normal, and you're like, there's no way.
Right.
No
Right.
way, there's no way there's normal. So I learned along the way that normal was not normal for me. And, heck, I had my first surgery when I was 7, and surgeries in my 20s. And then, I'd
Mm.
crashed and, with Lyme disease. But, if there's anything I could tell anybody is just listen to your body.
Mm.
Your body will tell you if it doesn't like a food or if it's not feeling well. And, sometimes we just have to slow down with life to just pay attention
Right.
to those things.
Yeah, there's a level of just kind of accepting where you're at, making the best of the moments, and it's so much easier said than done. But
Mhm.
giving yourself grace,
Yes.
with where you're at, and just taking those small little steps just to find out. And journal becomes kind of your best friend, to where you can, especially when you're having the memory issues, and it just helps guide you to effectively like what starts working. And it's so
Right.
wild, it when you're that ill, there's almost a level, dare I say, like, it has this impact. You almost don't even care, you don't even almost want to get better. You even start to think, wow, so much of this must be in my own head, but it's so wild because when you get a breath of fresh air, something starts breaking through. As soon as that starts shifting, you look back at that other self and it just becomes clear. You don't need any scientist, any doctor. It just hits you like a ton of bricks, and you're like, wow, I can't believe how devastating that illness is and was. Because when you get a breath of fresh air and any type of like quality of life and health back, like it just becomes clear, like, wow, that just was so negatively impacting, like that. No one can make that kind of stuff up. It
You're right. And and sometimes when I tell my story, like people are like, how? And I'm like, I
Right.
don't know how. I got through it. And
Mm,
what you said is the word is grace, because
right.
you know it's hard. And in these some of the groups I had to leave for a while because there was people are so devastated in there. But I had to go back because I had to be that positive to say, hey, look, you can get to the other side. Like I'm on the other side. Like I
Wow.
don't care if your doctor's telling you you can't heal and you'll always be sick, because that's not true. Like
Yeah.
those of us that have had that taste or that are there, like we need to champion to say, hey, look, we were left and we had to fend for ourselves, but we're going to pull you out because we got out. And and you're right, 500,000 people. So it took me 10 years to get diagnosed, and at that point it was 300,000. So what, over 3 million people were diagnosed before I got diagnosed? Like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't live in a country where that happens. We shouldn't live
No.
in a world where that's
Right.
possible.
Right. Yeah, that is true epidemic levels. And
Yeah.
not to mention that, well, to mention, clearly there's even passing down, from parentals to their offspring, that isn't necessarily getting accounted for. And it's not just being found through tick transmission, it's also being attributed to other biting insects such as mosquitoes. And that obviously is horrifying because that's just gonna that poses such a greater threat now. It's just like, wow, it may not be if you deal with this in the future. It more so might boil down to when, if in fact we don't change the trajectory of this sooner versus later.
Yeah, absolutely. And if 4 out of 5 dogs
Yeah.
have Lyme and they
Wow.
have fleas, and you get bit by a flea, it's a vector-borne illness. There's a possibility. And and
Right.
I believe that if your body's healthy enough, you may walk around and not have symptoms, just like
Right.
some dogs may not have
Yes.
symptoms. Like
Yes.
one of my dogs was bedridden with Lyme, and one of my dogs was fine. And
Right.
it's and no nobody wants to talk about it. And I'm fearful because my diagnosis went back before. Hey, when my son was 8, when he was finally diagnosed, was it the new tick or did he always have it? But
Yeah.
that's not something that I'm ever gonna to know for sure. But I can sure as heck advocate for him and
Yeah.
others and other women, just to say, hey, look, let's something has to give here. And if it's
Right.
me talking anywhere somebody will listen, that's what I want to do.
Right. To your point, I don't know what the healthy algorithm would be to structure for the society till things get under control. But for now, it might even be something along the lines of annual testing to ensure, or maybe it'll be every 5 years or something along those lines to ensure. Because to your point, a healthy, functioning, like you don't know how it's going to have the impact, and there's a slew of different co-infections. Um, like Lyme doesn't seem to be the same through any individual, like what they're dealing with. There's a whole bunch of co-infections, so it's kind of situational in that regard as to how it's going to impact them. But even the one best case scenario that has the immune system that isn't emitting, symptoms, like the reality, like, okay, you may potentially be able to go through your life without being that gravely negatively impacted. But why roll the dice? If there is effective testing, you could knock it out let's just say effectively and affordably uh, to mitigate all of the potential risk futuristically, because more than likely, at the point you have it, at some point down the road, your stress is going to flare up. You're going to have other illnesses that flare up. You're going to bonk your head. And essentially, when you're so even for those strong individuals that aren't emitting symptoms, this is kind of what happened to me, where I didn't have devastating symptoms, but I had impacts nonetheless, and it's changed the whole trajectory of my life before I even knew I was being impacted by this. And I felt like the dummy. I felt like and that's what's so wild. I'm not sitting here trying to play the violin. I'm just trying to acknowledge how this can have grave impacts all along the way, but inevitably, you know, um, it could lead to greater things such as or other things such as cancer. And why even take that risk when you can essentially address the root of the issue when it's not ailing you? That is, in fact, the best time to address it, where this individual could beat it, get it to that remissive state, and live out a healthy life.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things that in the Lyme support groups, everyone's like, when am I going to get my old life back? I'm like,
Mm,
you don't want your old life back, because
yes.
somewhere along the way you were going to crash.
Right.
And something was a catalyst to crash, to it just over just it just took over, you
Right.
know.
Wow. So, how could we help you, Wendy, in your mission? You have a web page, socials. What all are you getting involved in? That I mean, I would love to add links to this very episode. We just barely scratched the surface. Love to have you back and do more deep dives, but would love to support and plug um, obviously everything you're championing on your end.
Yeah, on Instagram and
Okay.
Facebook, Wendy Jean.
Okay.
I think it's Coach Wendy Jean, since I am a certified health coach now. Um,
Oh wow.
I I'm not on Twitter or X. I've been banned for 4 years because
Oh my
I
gosh.
talked about the long haul COVID symptoms and Lyme being so similar, and chronic
Right.
fatigue. So I
Right.
lost my voice there. Um,
Unbelievable.
yeah. And my company is called Clicks for a Cause. I did photography for nonprofits, but now the Clicks for a Cause is more looking into root cause and chronic illness. But I actually, on March 1st from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, I have a free event for anyone that's going through Lyme disease, where we kind of talk about the basics of Lyme, some testing with Lyme,
Okay.
how genetics can kind of play a role in that. So I'm really trying to, promote women's health. I get
Mm.
shadow banned on Facebook too, so I'm trying to pull some things more into my website. Um, but even if we look at Lyme disease, I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but like 90% are women.
Oh my
So
gosh.
there's this added component of women's health, and I know some of that's the hormone issues, but
Mm.
um, yeah, on my website, there's lots of information on there. I
Okay.
would love to speak if there are people that have stories they want to share.
Mm.
I want to share them as well. Whether
Right.
that's through social media or through some upcoming events, but there's power with all of us. So I can't
Yes.
thank you enough. I mean, we
Mm.
connected in the Lyme group, and I sometimes in the Lyme groups we're not allowed to talk because
Yeah.
I'm a practitioner now, and I'm like, isn't it support? Isn't that what this is supposed to be about? I'm
But
not
no
trying to,
self
I'll do it
promoting.
for free,
Right.
not
Yeah.
trying to,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of the I don't know, counterproductive to the whole thing, whereas like it's this private group. So being private, I mean, it's wild though. One of those is a 44,000, and then others are near like 10,000, and all these people, and it's just overwhelming for me to experience. Like there's undoubtedly very valuable data. I'm like within some basic communications. I was like, okay, the keys to all my issues are like right here, but it's so much information. It just was information overload. And I was just like, there has to be a more effective way. So it's not just private, but there was no legit way of like organizing and getting this out there and yeah, promoting like or communicating what really was working for individuals. And a lot of people have put in the time on a web page or on a profile or in a podcast or something that could could be astronomically positive to the momentum, the movement, exposure, but you can't really share that in there. So yeah, there's definitely uh, some folly. So I appreciate you reaching out and being vulnerable and being the warrior woman you are, to sharing the information you've come to find out, your personal story. We just need more and more of that. I would love to have you back on. And, really, I know we just dove right in. And I love that about you, just being spontaneous and not holding back, because the reality of the situation is you could breathe life and hope into someone else out there, and that is so important. And we could get more organized and, like you were saying, like build this community and momentum. And so anyone struggling with this or wants to know more, I would say, hey, go look at the links below. We're going to add Wendy's like IG, Facebook, website, whatever she's willing to share, we'll add it in this episode. Support her, support her cause. Do you have like funding or fundraisers or anything with what you're trying to do? Or
At the moment, it's out of the kindness of my heart, but I
wow.
do have paying clients for coaching, so that frees some stuff up.
Okay.
And I'm actually taking what was my photography company now that I'm able to do it again, because I had a really good team
Okay.
that worked with me. I'm actually in the process of switching that to a nonprofit.
Okay.
And then I'll do some of my advocacy work through the nonprofit. But I do free LYME calls. I do a free 30-minute calls, a couple that I can each month, just because I've been there and I needed someone to talk and I needed someone to help me
Wow.
gather my thoughts. So I do offer that. And the last thing I would share is palyme.org. It's the Pennsylvania Lyme Resource Network. I'm an advocate for them. I'm a volunteer for them. Because we are in the highest state, the amount of knowledge that they have on their website, if anyone doesn't know where to go, I mean, the Lyme disease organization is great, but palyme.org is such a great resource for anybody,
Wow.
anywhere across the country. But
Okay.
because we're so in it, they have really great things on their site.
Wow. Terrific. I I'm just I'm excited. I'm excited to get more content out like this. I'm just a limited being. I want to scream this from the rooftops. I want like solutions. I guess I'm an impatient man, right?
Yeah.
I need to pump the brakes a little bit, but it's one of them things that it's hard not to just want to scream it from the rooftops when you know personally how impacting, how scary, how life debilitating. It just takes out all the quality of life, and
Yeah.
it's super sad. And what any words of encouragement, anything for anyone really struggling as to like what really helped you through?
Yeah, I will say that a lot of people talk about being positive and mindset, and I'll
Hmm.
tell you what, it is something that we don't think about. So, there were days where I was angry, there were days where I was
Right.
sad, but I had to pull myself out of that, because once I learned what that was doing inside my
Mm.
body, to my adrenals, to my cortisol, to my central nervous system, like, I had to really grasp giving myself that grace and giving
Right.
myself time to heal, and knowing that it's a process, but more importantly, knowing that I could heal. Like, I was told by so many doctors, here's some pain medicine, go away, there's nothing wrong with you, you're never going to heal. But there's hope. There's so many of us we call ourselves healed. I can tell you you can't cure it all day long, but I have a beautiful life right now.
Mm,
I had a fundraiser event that I haven't seen women in 10 years since I got sick,
mm,
and I got to go spend the day with them, and I get to talk to you and talk to other people. So, just have that hope that it might take some time, and
right.
you may have a different path than I had or than what you have, but there is a path for you. And that, hold on to that to have that faith to know that you don't need the life you had, because the life you had, Lyme's going to take you somewhere else. And, if once you kind of change that mindset of it, that, you're not, I don't want to say like, oh, woe is me, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
you have to think, okay, I can do this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to come through stronger. And then I'm going to advocate for others, or maybe my children or other people in my family. And the last thing I'll say is, it doesn't matter if nobody believes you, because
Mm,
you live in your body every day.
right.
You live with the symptoms every day. And, that was a very frustrating piece for me, is that my doctors didn't understand, and my own family didn't understand. And,
Mm,
there's no way you could still have it after 14 days, because, that's what the CDC says. But, once I got past that, it freed me up inside.
mm,
I'm like, I can do this, whether I got to do it on my own or not. And now, people listen, and they're like, okay, we get it. We
wow.
totally understand. And, you know, that's why I offer the free calls, because if someone just needs someone to listen, because their family and their friends just don't,
Oof.
whether they believe them or they don't understand it, like those of us that have been in it, if we can help one person feel that, tomorrow's the day that they're going to turn a corner, then my journey was worth it.
Right. Wow. What beautiful words, Wendy. This just shows the heart you have and how on fire you are to genuinely show up to help others. I mean, you've been through the fire. You get it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited. Thank you, Wendy. I'm so grateful for your time and your vulnerability and showing up in such a loving way. Anything we missed, I'm excited to get this uploaded, and we could even take notes, right? And be excited for a future chat. So I'm just excited to be in touch. I have a feeling we'll have other great content. And any listeners that have questions and want to know more about Wendy, please just drop it in the comments. Just really excited to, just bring more awareness to all this. So with that, any burning desires, or we, uh, I think we're pretty good right there, Wendy.
Yeah, I think we could talk for days, and I
Oh
think we
yeah,
could talk for years, and I know we'll
right.
talk again. And
Okay.
thank you for doing what you're doing. I mean, to give a voice to so many is a powerful thing that you're doing. So
I
thank you.
appreciate that. Well, it's no secret. Uh, it's like I want to provide that voice for others that kind of we just didn't have, right?
Right?
And
Yeah.
just and that goes beyond Lyme disease, right?
Yes.
We it's just it's only our futures, it's only our lives. Like, man, I'm just excited. So let me get this uploaded. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us, and yeah, take care. I look forward to our next conversation. Listeners, thank you so much for joining. Bless you. Have a lovely day.